Thank you. Okay, so let's look at our municipal, I don't even know what we could call it, limited, I'm calling it limited self-governance.
You might put pilot in there.
Well, maybe we don't want a pilot. Maybe we just want to increase limited self-governance. Anyway, I know what I'm referring to. So,
yeah, you do.
So I will start the conversation by apologizing in no uncertain terms to anybody that I may have offended the other day when we were talking about this. And I seemed to, I was making what could have been interpreted as a rather snarky comments about some of the areas that we put in that municipalities could not venture into. And I made a rather unkind comment about banking. And I should not have done that. I apologize to the banking community. They are, I love my local banks, and I did not mean any disrespect by what I said. So, given that.
I understand they were listening with interest.
All right. I won't make any more snarky comments ever again because we'll get responses like that. Okay, but I do apologize. I did not mean in any way to disparage anyone. Okay, so let's look at this. And I also am apologizing to the committee because I said I would take a stab at rewriting the findings. And I have not had a chance to do that yet, but I promise I will by the end of the week or by the next time we take this up. Okay.
Wow.
Okay.
I'd forgotten that you'd promised to do that. That was a big promise. It's such a crazy time.
I know. I have unfortunately made promises beyond my capacity to keep them in this time. And so they're all lagging a little bit behind. Anyway, so let's go. I don't remember exactly where we were.
Are we working off the draft on our?
Yes, and I guess I have some concerns, and I just want to ask Tucker how this would work. If we just said that that municipalities were not allowed to adopt or amend ordinances in conflict with US and Vermont constitutions, federal or state law, does that not cover all of these things that we put in there that we very specifically said? Because there are state laws about health insurance and banking and utilities and crimes and criminal procedures.
So this suggestion was actually brought up a few times in the Senate's discussion of S-106 last biennium. And the response is, if the proposals cannot contain anything that is contrary to state law broadly, then they would effectively be barred from proposing anything. Because the entire point of this process is for them to propose some sort of authority that is not already available to them through state law. So Title 24 and then any specific provisions of state law and any of the other titles would be inaccessible to them if they were not allowed to propose something that was inconsistent with state law broadly. So if you were to put in that they were not allowed to propose something that is inconsistent with state law, they would effectively not be able to propose anything unless it is something that state law is completely silent about.
Senator Colmar?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Okay, so how is that different from what's in the bill? There's an enumerated, I think the alphabet goes up to R with things that they can't do. How is what you just said different from what's actually in the bill? Maybe I'm not understanding.
Because if there is anything in state law outside of those enumerated categories, then they would be able to propose them. You know, so for example, it calls out that they shall not propose anything that is inconsistent with state laws regulating alcoholic beverages, except that they may propose to increase municipal fee shares. So.
So what kinds of things are they likely to propose that are in opposition to state law?
I think if you were to take a look at any of the charter proposals that are coming up this year, I mean, that's what a charter proposal is essentially. It's asking for special permission under a special set of state statutes to have legislative authority. So non-citizen voting in local elections in Montpelier, upcoming at town meeting day. I believe that the city of Burlington is voting on just cause evictions. That is different than what is provided for in Title IX. So, I mean, if you were just to take a look at what's being proposed right now outside of this program, you might get an idea of what inconsistent powers municipalities are asking for.
So I'm looking at the list that Brattleboro gave us last year. On-street parking. Is there a law on the books about on-street parking? Or putting a stop sign on a town road?
I wish that my statutory knowledge was so encyclopedic that I could answer those questions offhand.
It's not. I'm surprised. Karen?
So thank you. There are rules, for instance, if you have a state highway going through town, then on-street parking, you couldn't just set up your own on-street parking provisions. And there are rules about where stop signs need to be placed and where speed signs need to be placed. I mean, if you get into AOT ASHTO signage, there's more rules than you can shake a stick at. But so I'm going to send you sort of the list that we had put together last year, and so you can look at that.
I guess I know that they are unless there's a law that prohibits them from doing it. Is it a state law? I mean, is there a state law right now that says that a town can't put a stop sign on a town street? There might be a rule, but is there a law that says that? Or is there a law that says, let's see, general obligation bonding for a municipal broadband network, that they can't do that? Is there a law that says they can't do that? I mean,
so, am I muted? No.
Yeah,
so,
no.
There's not a law that says, no, absolutely, you can't do those things. But there are laws that constrain the way you do those things and where you have to get approval from.
But I guess the question I'm asking here is that if somebody said, if some town said in this pilot, we're going to make it a crime to wear red in town on Thursdays. That would have to go through both this commission that's set up and the legislature for approval in what they're doing. So why are we so worried that they're going to be, and if they did want to make that new crime in town in an ordinance and there's a $25 fine for wearing red on Thursdays, do we care? I mean, does the state care? Is my question, I guess. I want to pass this with the least possible categories of
Well,
exemptions as possible. Yes, Senator Clarkson.
so I have a suggestion. Why don't we flip it around and say, as long as there's no conflict with state law, towns can do what they'd like. I mean, as long as it's not in direct conflict with state law, and then you could get rid of having to exempt all the little individual things and instead make it permissible rather than, you can't do all these 88 things. I mean, why not flip it around and make it, and put the burden on them for finding out if it's illegal, if they can't do it or not.
I think Tucker already answered that question at the beginning.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did he? When?
Yeah, I mean, not exactly. He answered it in a certain kind of way. If you said not in conflict with state law, that would leave us with nothing because everything is in conflict with state law the way things are
Be
written.
able to do anything.
I mean,
mean,
we have in state law, we have in Title 17 that they can have 3 select board members or 5, but they can't have 4 or 6, and that they can, and if they have 5, they have to have 1 3-year term and 2 2-year terms. That's state law. We should just butt out of those things. But that is a state law. So if they decided that they wanted to have 4 select board members.
So when Hartford went to 7, which I think they have now, that was a charter change.
It must have been.
Right. And
Yes.
I mean, like a great example just coming up is like town meeting, right? And like one of the most frustrating things for town meeting is that, it's on a set date and but if you want to move it, you can only move it to these set dates, right? So like we're very prescriptive about how you can move your dates. But if you want to do anything else, maybe weeks later, you have to go through a whole charter process. You can look at things like, Robert Rules of Order being the order, what you have to use to control your town meeting. Why? In this day and age, why? It's complicated, it's convoluted. Why are we saying that it has to be done that way? I mean, there's so many little things that are buried in statute that become really prescriptive that don't make sense. And the problem is when you go in front of not your committee, because you guys are great, but some government operations committee, maybe in a different chamber, that you put proposals through to change these little nuances in state statute. It becomes this huge conversation where it's going to impact every community the same way, regardless of size. And that's why, charters are great because you can kind of like craft it to be what a town needs. But the part of that is that it's set in stone and there's no flexibility there, just the same way any state law is. And so, unless the legislature becomes less prescriptive in how they update statutes and or stay on top of statutes, I mean, if we're going to be a Dillon's rule state, it makes sense that our parents, our legislature parents, would be on top of our statutory obligations and those sorts of things that we are always having to look back at laws that haven't changed in forever and wonder why are we still in this? And it's always us bringing it before the legislature to update. And sometimes it kicks us, in the backside because the conversations get a little wily and it turns into something, we don't really necessarily want. I mean, I brought it up several times, but bringing up a proposal to deal with blighted properties and communities. And, God forbid a town adopts an ordinance that deals with blighted properties. And, a few years back in the House Government Operations Committee, they were concerned about, well, God forbid a town were to say, you had to cut your grass at a certain inch level. And just because there was that fear of some town somewhere doing it that way, no town was going to be able to get that authority. So I think the bigger question here is, like, you have a charter process, which is good, but it's not great. It's not super flexible. It doesn't allow for creativity and ingenuity. It doesn't allow for a lot of flexibility. And the whole idea with this pilot is to put something out there, make everyone feel safe and secure that they're not opening the floodgates, and see where it leads us. And I also, the conversation, what was it, last week or the week before, about, why aren't the Government Operations Committee looking through the lens of how does this charter provision make sense, maybe at a broader scale? Like, why are we just limiting said XYZ charter provision to this one community? Does it make sense to open it to other communities as well? I think that's a great idea. And I think that would be, I don't know how you would legislate that, but it sounds like something that would be really beneficial to all communities, to at least have the legislature, again, who are our parents under our state constitution, look more holistically about these things. And so I'll leave it at that.
So one other example, if I'm,
Yes,
one
please.
other example is actually a bill that's in the House Transportation Committee right now, and would allow towns to do traffic calming and pedestrian safety on their main streets if their main street, it goes through a village and it's a state highway. Again, the state highway issue, but there are a lot of people very interested in that. And that's coming out of Waitsfield, where somebody was actually killed by a crosswalk last year.
So I'm
By
going to
the
make
crosswalk or in it?
They were killed in the crosswalk, not by the crosswalk.
Did I say by the crosswalk?
That's
Sorry.
okay. I had a vision of the crosswalk coming up and, doing, and
So-
we've had the same in Woodstock.
So I'm going to make a couple comments. We in Putney, we tried to get a crosswalk on Route 5 where it goes through the village. And what we were told by transportation is, why would we put a crosswalk there? There's nowhere to go from anywhere else. I mean, which wasn't true, but they couldn't see that people needed to be able to cross the street there. But I'm always blown away by when I start thinking about this, because the way the federal government works is anything that isn't prohibited by the federal government, the states are allowed to do. And if we in Vermont thought that it would be the way we treat our towns is the way the federal government would treat us, we would be up in arms. So we just don't trust our local people. That is the bottom line. And I don't know how to get us there. Senator Collmore?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I agree with you, by the way. I think this whole committee does. We've always tried to craft something that would help our municipalities. I'm curious, back, and I was around at the time, how did Church Street in Burlington get closed? Was that by charter, or was that something that somehow we allowed to happen? And Karen just mentioned some traffic calming situations. Rutland's just done that on a couple of streets that go right through the downtown. I don't remember any charter for Rutland City, so they must have come up with some way to get around whatever regulations they needed to in order to do that. They've built out little, I don't know what you call them, but you can't, there used to be 4 lanes, now it's 2. So it slows the traffic down. How did all that come about? Church Street up in Burlington and the most recent examples in Rutland?
Well, I would have to go back and double check on Church Street, but I believe that was actually they worked with the federal government on that, and there may have been community development entitlement funding or even UDAG funding. I have to go back and check. And then in Rutland, if it's on a local street, they have, the city has more authority, and they may also have more authority in their charter than a town that's regulated only by the statutes. But there's a definite difference between a local street and a numbered state highway.
Well, I think in Rutland's case, it was both. Center Street, which is probably a city road, which goes from the top of Route 7 down into the downtown area, was changed. But so was West Street, which in essence is Route 4. And there was a piece of that was changed too. I don't want to get into the weeds here, but I'm just curious. It seems like sometimes it's okay to do it and sometimes it isn't.
It may, if you checked, you may find that it took them a long, long time to do it because they had to work with the Agency of Transportation. Because I know that there was an instance in Brattleboro where they wanted to put a stop sign on a street and it made perfect sense. And everybody who lived there and traveled there and was in Brattleboro knew that there should be a stop sign there. But it took a long, long time because they had to do traffic studies and they had to, Agency of Transportation had to do a lot of stuff. They finally got the stop sign, but took a long time. So where do we go with this committee? Where are we? What should we do? Sarah, Selena?
I'm not sure.
You're
No, I'm
supposed to have an
afraid- I
answer
mean,
when you raise your
I know,
hand.
but I'm going to say something. I'm going to say something that appears to be negative, but I don't want you to take it negatively because I want to do what we're trying to do. But I'm afraid that we're having a conversation about how to just make the charter changes a little different. But unfortunately, what we have on paper so far makes the charter change process even harder, I think, by making them have those public meetings and go before this commission and the bill and all that kind of stuff. And I wonder if there isn't just another way to look at it, which is to make the charter change process easier, which I think Gwen maybe mentioned or alluded to something like that. Like maybe we're taking it from the wrong point of view. We're sort of saying, instead of charter changes, you can do this bill, what's in this bill. But what's in this bill is a lot like charter changes, only sometimes worse. So maybe instead we should just look at a way to make charter changes more easy.
I just a comment on charter changes. It's on topic, but it's also a little off topic. But which
That's
I
okay.
find
I'm not
really-
sure what I'm talking about anyway.
What I find really interesting, and because usually the charters are going to the House Gov Ops Committee, initially, and it's so interesting to me because it becomes this like, I feel like a lot of the conversation is about the process, right? The making sure that all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed and the vote was conducted a certain way and the right paperwork went to the Secretary of State and the right this and the right that. And it's like, it becomes, it's more, and then if they don't do it the right way, how valid, was the process because they didn't do it exactly as it's prescribed in, charter and statute. And then, once you get to the substance of the conversation, it's either, some of the, it skates by because it's, there's not a lot of controversy. And then it's kind of the thing where you're like, God, that community just spent a year with this, charter and it was just such an easy fix. And then they never get, again, going back to the, maybe it's if it's good for the goose, good for the gander kind of argument, where if it's that easy for a community, then it should be general law. But if it becomes more of a controversial issue, like the, non-citizen voting provision, then, they'll have more eyes on it. I don't know how you separate the two, but I agree that the charter process should be easier, but that's still, it's not the whole thing because you're not getting to the issue of having general applicability in law and flexibility in charter. I think I don't know how Karen feels about this, but I think that if there's a way to, have the legislature look through that lens, like I said earlier, about how, yes, it's a charter for the city of Barre, but maybe it doesn't need to be a charter for the city. Maybe it could just be general law.
We have,
So, go ahead, Karen.
We have over the years proposed legislation that would make the charter change process easier. One of the, and I can dig up all those proposals, but one of them was that a charter change would be on the calendar for so many days, and if fewer than at least 30 House members or 6 senators would have to ask for it to be taken into committee in order for that to happen, and otherwise it would just go through. So there are those kinds of ideas that have been floating around out there. And for some of the more mundane issues, like increasing the size of your select board, nobody would ask for those to go into.
Oh, yeah.
Now, as soon as I say nobody, somebody will,
Yeah.
but theoretically, nobody would be bothered with that.
So maybe it just, when Gwen was talking, it just, maybe we look at general law and just remove all those provisions.
And I, Karen, and you can, I don't hope to stop me if I go too far, but I think that the way the S106 bill is written, you know, again, we've had time over the last couple of years to put it down and look at it with fresh eyes. If it's going to look like it does now with all those A through M or R or X or whatever letter we're up to for what we can't do, it's more work to comply with it than it's worth. So I would say unless that's taken out, I don't see the value in moving forward with that as is.
Mm-hmm.
And Karen, you can fire me if you need to. But
Yeah, right. You're fired. No, I would definitely agree. And I think that actually the board agrees. We had that conversation last year at some point at a board meeting, and it would be just a very, very heavy lift for a town to go through this entire process and maybe end up in the same place.
So let's drop S106 and let's try and figure out how we can give towns what other things we can do that might give them more flexibility. And I will say that we probably won't come up with those before crossover, but we could have I would think, a good discussion about some of the things where we might look at general law and just see if they make sense anymore and just wipe those out. Senator Clarkson?
So if we're going to do that, I would entertain actually hearing from some of our town managers, and I'd devote an hour to hearing from, many from different range of size towns. I mean, last year we heard from a couple, and really get a sense from them where the barriers are. What are the most irritating, sticky points for them? What would they like to see? What would be their ideal in looking at these possibilities and this opportunity? Because what we're really offering is an opportunity for flexibility, simplicity, and more self-governance, and some pilots for self-governance.
Well, we wouldn't even have to do pilots. If we're looking at changing general law, it could just be for everybody who's out there.
So I would suggest we maybe have a public hearing or just an extended committee conversation where not a public hearing. Okay, no public hearing, but invite a range of them. Yeah.
Yes, no, I will pledge that we will spend an entire day at least when we come back looking at what we can do to make it easier for people, and we'll get towns with big towns with administrators, towns with town managers, towns without any, just select boards, and hear from a whole range of people, but no public hearing.
I meant just let's invite them in, and I can think of some very wise, experienced retired town managers too, like Frank Heald, who, there are quite a few who've thought about these kinds of things and really would have thoughtful contributions on this.
When? And then Senator Polina.
The House Government Operations Committee is taking up the Winooski Charter tomorrow, and Tucker might want to, say something. But their charter has that provision that Karen had brought up about if if a town has a charter provision, they can borrow that charter provision. It's already been, that's already been approved. So I think that'll be a really interesting conversation, and it'll be a good barometer of figuring out where the committee is. And obviously there's the constitutional issues that Tucker had raised. So it'll be interesting to see if they try to accommodate that or if they just don't move forward with it at all. And so, yeah, so that I think that'll kind of give us an idea of what our proposal of looking it through the lens of how this applies to everybody, right? How every charter proposal goes through, how warm they are to that idea. Because like we said, it's never your committee, because your committee is at least willing to, just go a little crazy and let go of the reins a little bit, but not so much in the House. So.
Senator Polina, you had a question.
Yeah, actually, two things. I would like to, I hadn't thought about this, but I would like to hear more about the constitutional issues involved in that charter change, because what do I know? So if Tucker wanted to talk about that for a minute, that'd be good. But I also just have a sort of a question. When we talk about the fact that we're trying to give towns the ability to do things that are not in conflict with state law, I mean, I understand what that means, but do charter changes ever sort of challenge state law? The charter changes are, I mean,
that's what they do.
It's kind of, it's like, I don't know. It's just, this is very confusing, not confusing conversation, but it's just, I'm in a quandary about what to do. Because it seems like what we want to do is have a commission. We have this commission in the bill. I know we're talking about moving away from the bill, but we have a commission in the bill that would just decide to exempt certain towns from state laws and go their own way. I don't know if that makes any sense, but the idea that charter changes represent a change in, or a challenge to state law by allowing towns to do something different seems to open a door to what we're talking about. But I could be totally wrong. I feel like we're talking in circles.
So I am going to make a suggestion, then I'm going to have Tucker, that we completely move away from S102. We not think about a commission or anything else and that list of things. That we have devote a couple days to hearing from different size communities, differently administered, managed communities, and hear what are the things that bug them the most, the things that they think stand in the way of them being able to address local issues in a creative and flexible manner. And then, so I'm glad I didn't rewrite the findings, because that would have been a waste. But anyway, and then we look at the whatever they come up with, the list. And then we look at general law that controls their inability to act creatively and flexibly. And that we look at just deleting those laws. If it's a law that says that they have to have 3 select board members, and lots of towns are saying that's gets in our way, let's just take that off the books. We've done it with other things, but it's taken us 4 or 5 years to come up with them because we can't act quickly enough. So that's my suggestion for kind of a process of moving forward. And everybody can disagree with me if they want, but I'll go to Tucker right now.
So would you like me to talk about some of the charter proposals concerning municipalities being able to access other chartered powers?
Yeah, I think that's what Anthony and Wynn wanted.
So there's a potential spectrum of constitutionality here. So I'll start with the stuff that is likely unconstitutional on its face. And that's any formulation that would allow a charter amendment without action by the General Assembly. Don't panic yet, because we're talking specifically about special laws, special statutes that would need to be amended by the General Assembly. Only the General Assembly can amend those statutes, right? So if the formulation in the charter says that the municipality can amend its charter and statute without coming to the General Assembly, unconstitutional. Now, the concept of granting legislative authority to a municipality that allows them to access existing chartered powers for other municipalities may be constitutional. That may be a step that could be taken, saying you, Winooski, whoever, may adopt an ordinance based on existing statute, which includes Title 24 Appendix, the charters that are out there. That may be constitutional, but you're also presented with issues of special law in that case. So for example, if the charter provisions that are granted to the other municipalities say, town of Brandon, you specifically may open the town of Brandon Electric Utility Company and provide municipal utility services to residents within your municipality. I think there would be some issues there with allowing another municipality to access those very specific special powers. And of course, the question is always going to be, when you pass this general charter amendment for Winooski or whoever, is it within the will and knowledge of the General Assembly that you're taking into consideration all of this and you're overriding those special laws that are out there? Are we going to have to not withstand certain provisions to make sure that the municipality has general access? I'm not sure. The next constitutional issue comes with granting that general access and then next biennium or next session, passing a charter amendment that is again very specific to another municipality. So let's say you pass this general access for Winooski, and then the next session, or let's go to next biennium because it's more clear. Next biennium, new assembly comes back, completely different legislature, unbound by previously passed statutes, comes back and says, okay, Tuckertown, you are allowed to do this. Now that Tuckertown statute is not only more specific, it is later enacted. And it is later enacted by a General Assembly that is completely reconstituted, has new authority, and is unbound by statute. Then we get into a really interesting constitutional conundrum about whether or not that previously passed general provision in Winooski's charter would allow them to access those future specific later enacted powers. However, that may not be your problem. That may be the problem of the municipality that attempts to wield that authority and immediately gets a judicial challenge from an aggrieved citizen.
Okay. Welcome back, Senator Rum. I hope you had a good presentation.
I think it did go well. Thanks. And I
Good.
want a town named after me too. I'm going to start to pick one.
Well, I'm very
Romville?
interested in having Tuckertown constituted around my property and then getting a charter that says that I can do whatever I want in contravention of state law. It'd be very beneficial for me.
I don't want a town named after me.
But you'd have like a French villa, Jeanette. It would be so cute.
Oh, yeah, right. Oh, Jeanette, okay.
It would be a Norwegian town.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so where are we here with this committee? Senator Rum, while you were gone, we heard from the league that they don't want us to pursue this bill this year because the way with all those restrictions in it, it's more work than it's worth, and it doesn't suit the purpose that we're trying to get to. So what we're thinking about is, and the other committee members have to weigh in because I'm the only one that's suggested this, is that we, well, I think this initial suggestion came from Senator Clarkson, that we take a couple days when we come back and hear from towns of different sizes, different geographic locations, different management structures, and listen to them about what are the biggest impediments to them to be able to creatively and flexibly address their local needs. Then we start looking at what those are and trying to figure out how then to approach giving them that flexibility and creativity. Is that kind of what we talked about, committee?
Yep.
Yeah.
So does that make sense to anybody to start looking at that way instead of pursuing this bill that nobody wants anymore?
Yes.
Well, and it's a classic example of only a fool doesn't change their mind, because the league was very supportive of 106 last year. I mean, and they've been thinking about it, and I mean, I think we all were, and I think we're all supportive of giving municipalities more lead, letting them run a little more independently and flexibly and creatively, and without such micromanagement.
Yeah,
From
just to add, and I don't, again, not to be super negative, but when going back to that blighted properties, conversation that I had, and Tucker had brought it up last week or the week before, whenever we had talked about this, but, under the enumerated ordinance powers under 24 VSA 2291, which is sort of that laundry list of like what towns can do under ordinance, under their police powers, health, safety, welfare. It's great to have these conversations, and we'll obviously lean into it and have, towns voice their specifics, but, they'll have those proposals. Like Springfield will say, we want to be able to address blighted properties in our downtown. And then you're still left with putting a provision that says a town, shall have the ability to adopt an ordinance addressing blighted properties. And then you're still left with that conversation is, the legislature saying, do we want to be able to let go of that power and trust towns are not going to abuse their police powers to address blighted properties? Every legislative body, every legislature is different in a biennium, so we're hopeful. But part of us dropping the 106 is not because we don't believe in that pilot program, because it worked phenomenally. It worked phenomenally well in West Virginia, which is where we borrowed the idea from. But we understand that if this is the most favorable way of it showing up in the legislature through the Senate, because we know we're going to have the best results in the Senate, it's just going to get worse in the House. It's not going to get better. Normally we would be okay with, working on it harder in the next chamber, but we just know we're not going to get that reception over there.
Well, there are some people in the legislature, both in the Senate and in the House, I believe, who would probably even tighten the reins more. So we'll never convince 180 people, because I firmly believe that there are among us in the 180, a number of people who really believe that we need to have that paternalistic oversight over our towns, because we simply can't trust them. So.
I will.
Yes, Senator Rahm.
Well, I'll add, I shared this proposal with my local government law professor, who's been doing this for a long time. And he said, this seems so exciting, except for all of these, you took out all the fun stuff, So that was his attitude too. Is he always looking for interesting and creative ways to give local government, more opportunity to experiment. And he saw the same thing that word.
Who is that?
His name is Gerald Frug. He's taught local government law at Harvard Law School since 1969. And Barack Obama's taken his class. Murrow Weinberg has taken his class. It's a really valuable class to take for anyone going through that school. I just visited and took the class.
Well, didn't the Kennedy School have cross abilities to take courses at the law school?
Well, right. I just don't, for the record, I was never admitted to Harvard Law School. So
no, but you were part of the Kennedy School, and the Kennedy School enables you to take classes at the law school.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. So let's get, when we have people coming and talking to us, let's get some people who are not necessarily involved in governing a town, but some thinkers like that who are, I was thinking of Frank Bryan. I don't know that he does this anymore at all. Susan Clark. I mean, there are people out there who've been thinking about this for a long time, and who might have some suggestions, and maybe we can become like West Virginia was a model for us, maybe we can become a model for some of the other Dillon's states.
Exactly.
There's
And we
a
could get
different way to
Keisha's
do it.
professor. We could get Keisha's professor and somebody from the law school. I don't know if we still have a local government expert, but I think we probably do. But we could you could ask your professor if he'd like to join us.
Well, since you said it a few times, I feel compelled to say he refuses to testify to government bodies because he doesn't like to get involved in conversations like these. He likes to teach people like me to go back out and spread the
Yeah.
gospel.
That makes sense. So what do you say, committee? Should we go in this direction and see what we can come up with about better creative ways to approach this, and maybe ways that will engender less resistance,
Yes.
Sure.
or maybe engender more resistance, but are better anyway?
Yeah, and I just have to be reminded about, at some point, about the resistance that we face in the House, because I just remember there was resistance, but I can't remember why there was such resistance.
Well, there were 8 people in the Senate that voted against it.
No, I remember that discussion,
Mhm. Yeah.
but then
and
it
in
just
the
sat
House-
on the wall in the House General, and it didn't move, and it didn't move for a reason.
No, House Gov Ops, not general.
I meant House Gov Ops. You
Yeah.
know what I meant to say.
So do you want to, either Gwen or Karen, do you want to?
Well,
Do you,
they actually never even held the conversation in the House Government Operations Committee. They took up individual charter changes that they wanted to address, and they never even had the conversation otherwise. So we don't have a really good fix on what the reluctance was in that committee. We've got lots of theories, but we never actually got told.
but remember, we're live.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. We never actually got told what the problem was.
Well, I would say that whatever we might come up with, I think that the league needs to do some real bush beating and get people out there to contact their representatives. And it is interesting to me because in the past, when I first came into this legislature, the feeling was that whatever a town clerk said, the House members would do. It was just,
I
They
thought
were
that was
very-
just for one town in
No.
a county in the Southwest.
no, that was the general feeling in this committee at the time, and in a number of issues. And then somehow that changed, and it seems now that there's less trust by House members of local government even than, and I always thought that House members were much closer to their local government and
Well,
would be more trusting and more,
Well, a huge percent of them are former select board members. So I have to point out, Madam
maybe
Chair,
that's why
that-
they don't trust select board members.
No, I think that I think that may not be the case anymore as we look at the composition of the House shifting a bit. Madam Chair, it's after 4.
Yes.
And,
Oh, I'm sorry. I
and
didn't
I
know
think
that.
you and I have to be somewhere else.
I have to be at a chairs meeting. Committee, if you want to keep on talking, you're welcome to do that. It'll be Senator Rahm, Senator Polina, and Senator Collmore. Otherwise, we
Be
will
careful.
see you.
Just Senator White, on Friday at 2:30, this is on the agenda, so you might want to take it off because we're not going to be.
You got it.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay.
Meeting